Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I am really excited to host this event tonight. These are some of my favorite people. We like to celebrate our locals here at Two Rivers. So we have Willy Vlautin, and we're promoting his new book, The Night Always Comes. It releases in April. And Craig Popelars from local publisher Tin House is going to be our facilitator tonight, and we're featuring a new book from Tin House called Unsettled Ground by Claire Fuller. And Craig, before we go forward, are there any other Tin House books that you want to mention?
If that's okay, I'll maybe leave that to the end so we could jump into the main event.
Okay, that sounds great. All those books.
All right. And just to make sure everybody can hear and see everything okay at this point. If I don't see anything in the chat, I think we'll take that as a yes. But first of all, thank you everyone for joining us on this Sunday afternoon. Most especially, thank you, Christine and Two Rivers Bookstore in St. John's for hosting this event. I will tell you that I moved to Portland, Oregon about 1.5 years ago. And one of the very first places that I went into was Two Rivers Bookstore. And I had met Christine years ago when she was a bookseller in the Bay Area. We had mutual friends, and I walked into the store and she said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Can you tell me," and it was something about ordering books through Amazon. I said, "I'd like to order some books through Amazon." And she just looked at me like, "Who are you?" And then like a second later, she goes, "Craig Popelars." And it was so great. It was like just to make that connection again. And the fact that I had this amazing independent bookstore just blocks from where we're living was a real blessing. And to have Christine in the community here, serving the readers of St. John's and Portland and putting events together like this is just wonderful. So thank you, Christine and Two Rivers Bookstore. And it looks like we have so many people from Cleveland, Ohio, England, Pacific Northwest, Canada is here, just taking a look at everybody in the chat. So thank you for joining us this evening. For some reason, because it's cold and somewhat rainy in Portland today, I feel like we'd be better served if we were all gathered in some kind of pub with a fire going and maybe the Waterboys Fisherman's Blues playing in the background and drinking something. But this is wonderful to have Claire and Willy here today to introduce their forthcoming books. What I thought I'd do is introduce both Willy and Claire. They'll take a moment to read a little bit from the beginning of their book to sort of set the stage. And then we'll go back and forth with some questions and conversation. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun. Just to let you know, Iron and Wine and the Pogues have played for that promotional spot in the back of both Willy and Claire's backgrounds there. So thank you, Iron and Wine and Pogues, for being there. Oh, Willy Vlautin, born and raised in Reno, Nevada. Willy is the author of 6 novels and is the founder of the bands Richmond, Fontaine, and the DeLines. Willy has been the recipient of 3 Oregon Book Awards. He was a finalist for the Penn Faulkner Award and was shortlisted for the Impact Award, the International Dublin Literary Award. 2 of his novels, The Motel Life and Lean on Pete, have been adapted as films, and his novels have been translated into 11 languages. His forthcoming novel, The Night Always Comes, will be published in April of 2021 by HarperCollins. And Willy joins us here from Portland, Oregon. I want to make sure that because this is an independent bookstore event, I want to share with you what one of the booksellers around the country has said about Willy's book. Carol Shank-Garner of Schuler's Books in Grand Rapids. Carol's an amazing reader. Here's what she shared about Willy's The Night Always Comes. Willy's Willy Vlautin's superpowers include the ability to write about heartbreaking subject matter in ways that leave the reader feeling uplifted rather than depressed. The use of vivid detail to depict the characters' lives in striking clarity, and the powerful empathy that makes the day-to-day struggles of ordinary people who continue, despite the odds being stacked against them, read like a heroic quest. In The Night Always Comes, Lynette works multiple jobs, not all of which are legal, in a last-ditch effort to buy the home where she lives with her mother and developmentally disabled brother, in a rapidly gentrifying city that leaves little room for the marginal. Highly recommend it. Also joining us today is Claire Fuller. Claire is the celebrated author of 3 novels, Our Endless Number of Days, which was the winner of the 2015 Desmond Elliott Prize for Debut Fiction, Swimming Lessons, which was shortlisted for the Encore Prize, and the critically acclaimed Bitter Orange, which was longlisted for the International Dublin Literary Award. Her novels have been translated into more than 15 languages. Claire lives in Winchester, England, and her forthcoming novel, Unsettled Ground, will be published by Tin House in May of 2021. I want to just remind everybody, if all of a sudden Claire just falls off to the side, it's because it's past midnight where she is in England. So we really appreciate the 4 Red Bulls that she drank prior to this event starting. Rachel Watkins, a wonderful bookseller out of the Avid Bookshop in Athens, Georgia, wrote, "It may seem odd to the English village of Inkborn that the adult children, Jeannie and Julius Cedar, never left home. With their mother Dot, the 3 of them have lived a meager life for over 50 years. An unexpected death starts a series of events that blindside the twins. Beautifully immersive, Claire Fuller's Unsettled Ground explores the consequences of decisions and secrets adults make when their children have no agency. This is a captivating, suspenseful book that will end with you deeply wanting to have a conversation with Dot." So welcome, Willy and Claire, to the event today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Willy, will you kick things off with just a little bit of a reading from the very beginning of the book to sort of set the stage?
Sure. I have a bad feeling I'm feeding back.
A little bit.
Hey, I am all right. Jesus, Lord, help us. All right. I'm going to just start a small section in the book. I hope I'm not feeding back. If I am too bad, maybe somebody could let me know on the what do you call that thing? The little chat room. All right. In the carport to the right of the house was a car she had never seen, a white Toyota Avalon Unlimited. It had no license plate, only a placard that said Toyota of Portland, and taped to the rear windshield was a white trip permit. Lynette parked on the street, got out, opened the passenger side door for Kenny, and helped him from the car. They walked across the front lawn, and she stopped and looked inside the Toyota. The seats were black leather, and clear plastic liner covered the carpeted floor. It was brand new. Inside the house, the curtains were shut and the lights were off. Their mother lay on the couch underneath the electric blanket watching TV. She sat up when they came in. "Come here and kiss your mother," she said to Kenny. He walked slowly toward her, and her hand shook slightly when she lit a cigarette, put it in her mouth, and took hold of his arm. "Sit next to me." She patted the couch with her free hand. "Sit right next to Mommy." Kenny shook his head. "Once in a while, you have to do what somebody else wants, not what you want, so sit." She squeezed his wrist as hard as she could and pulled him down to her. He moaned but sat. Lynette set her purse and keys on a table near the front door. "Whose car is that?" Their mother didn't answer. "Jesus, it's so awful out today." Lynette walked to the living room. "I don't know why you have to have it so dark in here all the time. Do you mind if I turn up the heat? At least for a little bit. I can't seem to get warm today." "Sure," their mother said. Lynette turned the thermostat up to 68. So whose car is that? It's really nice. Is it Cheryl's? Did yours break down? Their mother had a cigarette in her left hand and kept her right hand around Kenny's wrist. Her eyes were on the TV and her voice came out so quiet it was barely audible. It's mine. Lynette laughed. It's yours? Yeah, I bet. Their mother's voice grew louder, but now it was shaken. I bought it. Lynette looked at her, suddenly worried. What do you mean you bought it? You mean you bought a car today while I was gone? You didn't go to work like you said you bought a brand new car? Their mother was 57 years old and overweight by 40 pounds. She had dyed brown hair and was dressed in her work clothes, a black suit with a cream-colored blouse. On her feet were thick wool socks. She put the electric blanket over Kenny's legs, moved closer to him, and kept her hand tied around his wrist. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd get upset, but I've been looking to get a new car for a long time. You know that. And those guys at Toyota of Portland, they're nice. They're not slimy at all. So I set up an appointment, and they had the one I wanted. I didn't even have to put any money down, not a cent. And my payments aren't as bad as you think. They even gave me $1,500 for the Saturn, and you know that car was a death trap. The brakes were given out, and it didn't steer right. It needed new tires, too. The guys at Schwab said I shouldn't even be driving it. Well, how much was it? It was a good deal. How much? With everything in the better warranty, $39,000. Lynette sat on a wooden chair next to the front door. She covered her face with her hands, and her heart began racing. I'm really confused. We're supposed to sign the papers on the house next week. Is it going to screw up the loan? Did you think about the loan? Just the first little section of the book. All right, I'm turning it back up. I hope I don't feed back. Oh, hey, Craig, you're off. Your mic's off.
Okay, I think I'm on, right? Can you hear?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, now you're not feeding back at all. So thank you. That was wonderful, Willy. And can you give the audience a little bit of a sort of a storyline of what happens and set the stage?
Yeah, the book's set in North Portland, and it's about a working class family, a 57-year-old mother, her 32-year-old developmentally disabled son, and then her 30-year-old daughter who's moved back in. And they have a chance to buy their rental home that they've lived in for 30 years. And because Portland is gentrifying so quickly, like so many cities in the US, this is kind of their last chance. And the mother is worn out. She doesn't believe that buying a shack on the side of a freeway for around $300,000 is a good idea. And her daughter still believes in the American dream of home ownership. And the novel is really about, a dysfunctional family trying to navigate getting left behind in a modern economy.
Thank you, Willy. That's wonderful. And Claire, would you start us off with a sort of a select reading as well?
Yeah, sure. So this is Unsettled Ground. And again, I'm going to read the beginning, about a page. The morning sky lightens and snow falls on the cottage. It falls on the thatch, concealing the moss and the mouse damage, smoothing out the undulations, filling in the hollows and slips, melting where it touches the bricks of the chimney. It settles on the plants and bare soil in the front garden and forms a perfect mound on top of the rotten gatepost as though shaped from the inside of a teacup. It hides the roof of the chicken coop and those of the privy and the old dairy, leaving a dusting across the workbench and floor where the window was broken long ago. In the vegetable garden at the back, the snow slides through the rips in the plastic of the polytunnel, chills the onion sets 4 inches underground, and shrivels the new shoots of the Swiss chard. Only the head of the last winter cabbage refuses to succumb, the interior leaves curled green and strong, waiting. In the high double bed up the left staircase, Dot lies beside her adult daughter Jeannie, who is gently snoring. Something different about the light in the room has woken Dot, and she can't get back to sleep. She gets out of the bed, floorboards cold, air colder, and puts on her dressing gown and slippers. The dog, Jeannie's dog, a biscuit-coloured lurcher who sleeps on the landing with her back to the chimney breast, raises her head, inquiring about the early hour as Dot passes, lowering it when she gets no answer. Downstairs in the kitchen, Dot jabs at the embers in the range with the poker and shoves a ball of paper in, some kindling and a log. She feels a pain behind her left eye. Between her left eye and her temple, does the place have a name? She needs to go to the optician, get her eyes checked, but then what? How will she pay for new glasses? She needs to take a prescription to the chemist, but she's worried about the cost. The light is wrong down here too. Lowing, owing, glowing. She touches her temple as though to locate the soreness and sees through the curtains in the gap where they don't quite meet that it is snowing. It is the 28th of April.
Thank you, Claire. And as Willy did, can you tell us a little bit more about Unsettled Ground and what happens immediately after that scene?
Yeah.
You're not spoiling anything.
Yeah, I won't spoil anything. But that is, Dot comes down to the kitchen. She's the mother of Jeannie and Julius, who are her twin children who live with her still and age 51. And it's not a spoiler really to say that Dot comes down to the kitchen and has a stroke and dies. And the children obviously lived with her all those years and are quite isolated in terms of knowing anyone else, neighbours, jobs, education. They're a very insular family. And so when Dot dies, these two adult children are really thrust out into the world and have to navigate officialdom and technology and their neighbours and their landlord, and it's striking how similar this is to what Willy was talking about, because they are evicted from their cottage, and all Jeannie wants is to be able to get back home. So that's kind of really what it's about.
You know, having the opportunity, Claire and Willy, to read both of your novels, and Claire, I read yours when it came in manuscript, and Willy, we met up, I guess, a few months ago for some drinks over in St. John's, and you slipped me the galley of yours, and I ended up reading this in one night. And thematically, despite how far apart Portland is from a small English village, in many ways, your novels are about characters that are left behind by the modern world, and that they are now faced with trying to catch up to the modern world. And as a result, desperation comes into play in a very big way. Can you guys talk a little bit about sort of that and why that? But it was very interesting for both of these novels to talk about characters that the modern world has in many ways left behind.
Well, I guess I'll start, but really, I never planned my novels, so I had no idea that it was going to be about people on the margins of society, except that often I start with a person in a place, and the place that I found that inspired this novel was a dilapidated caravan in the woods. And I think for the US people listening and watching, that's a trailer camper for you, something that's towed behind a car. They're very common in this country, and when they're no longer wanted, they are often just dumped. So I came across this caravan, or my son took me to this caravan that he had discovered, and it was a very atmospheric place. And it just started me thinking, who would have lived there? What would have taken them there? What would their circumstances have been? What would their life have been? Because nobody could have really wanted to live in this place because it was a long way from anywhere. It was quite a long way from the road, a long way from a shop or presumably where they worked. So it would have been quite difficult circumstances. So that's what I was exploring. And rather than start with someone in the caravan, I created Jeannie and I gave her kind of a history. So she starts off in this cottage. So it wasn't really planned that I wanted to write about people on the edges of society, but that's what happened.
Willie?
For me, I think just living in Portland it's such a dramatic place to live in right now. I mean, I used to count cranes downtown of all the new buildings being going, and it was just remarkable. And all these old cool houses that, 20 years were affordable for working class people. Like even in St. John's, like houses that were built for working class people in the day are now like $400,000. The crazy thing to me is when I started the novel, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, and $300,000 for a house along the freeway was kind of a fairly decent deal. And now that same house would probably be $400,000. And at the same time, you're seeing all the tent encampments everywhere in Portland, and it just kind of knocked the wind out of me. And for a guy like me who was just a house painter for years and never could come up with $400,000, I remember in the year 2000 I bought a house for $70,000 and I barely got a loan, and I had $20,000 down, and I barely got a loan for $50,000. So I guess it was that, just like how can a working class family buy a home, and then like so many families, they have burdens. They have a developmentally disabled sibling son in the makeup, and they also have, one of them has really bad credit, like so many people do. So like most working class people, they got their baggage already, and then you throw on top a rapidly gentrifying city, and so that's kind of what stopped me and made me want to write this one.
Mm-hmm. And while you guys have the characters, sort of shared characters that are working on the outside of society like this, there's with both characters, both novels, there's a sort of a wanting and a desire for independence. Through desperation, there's also independence. Willie and yours, Lynette wants the independence of owning her own home. They live in, I think their home was like built in 1922. There's so many things shot about it because it's a rental property that they've lived in for their entire life. And she wants her own independence. And Claire, I think in your novel, Julius also wants his independence, but there are those, it's the inheritance as well. Julius feels that he has to take care of his sister, and Lynette has to take care of Kenny in Willie's novel. And there is that somewhat inability to be able to really break free from those things that are a part of you to sort of move forward. And I think that there's a great sense of familial ties in both your books that are incredibly powerful, that I felt was just like the love between Julius and Jeannie, and the same with Lynette and Kenny. That sibling love shines throughout both of your books. But they're also, they've inherited from their parents their situations. And can you each talk about that? Because that's a big part of both of your novels, is sort of the inheritance of what parents have brought and how these children have to now work past what their parents have laid out for them, in good and for bad.
Yeah, I guess with Jeannie and Julius, Dot has left them with huge debt that they were completely unaware of, because she was the one who looked after all the money in the house. and they've always managed on very little. Jeannie and Dot had a market garden, and they sold some vegetables, and Julius did odd jobs. So they really were managing kind of hand to mouth and just using cash, really. They had no bank accounts. They had no access to technology, really. I mean, Julius has a mobile phone, but that's the limit of it. They have no transport. So they are only just getting by, but quite happily getting by until Dot dies, and then the borrowing that has been going on becomes revealed, and the situation with their house, that they believed that they kind of had an interest in it from the landlord, and the landlord would let them stay there for the rest of their lives. It wasn't theirs to pass on, but they thought that was going to be their home forever. And so this all comes as a huge shock that Dot has kept that from them. And the quote that you read from one of those booksellers who said, you know, she just wanted to have a good word with Dot by the end of the book. And I kind of almost want to say, what were you doing? You love your children. You kind of love them almost to extremes, actually. I mean, that's another inheritance that they are given, that Dot loves them so much that actually she inhibits them and has kept them at home because of that. Mm-hmm. And that becomes something that they have to grapple with as well.
Mm-hmm. And in Willy, your novel, Lynette and her relationship with her mother, that is a very point of tension in the novel, and propels Lynette even more to sort of want to break free from this, but also sort of those familial ties that bind. Can you talk about sort of Lynette and her relationship with her mother and how that sort of feeds the novel?
Yeah, I mean, I was interested in the idea of when a family has a kid that has disabilities. In this case, her older brother is developmentally disabled. It puts a burden on the family financially to boot. And so, like what happens in a lot of families, the husband quickly vanishes, and suddenly it's a mom who works at the jewelry department of Fred Meyer, and her son and her daughter. And I think Lynette becomes kind of an indentured servant in a lot of ways, just so the family can get by. So I think Lynette has never really gotten to be a kid as much as she, like a normal kid might. She's always been just kind of taking care of somebody. Mm-hmm. And so she's really struggled mentally with that. And she's had some bust ups in her life. And so I think when you meet her, she comes back to the family. She's around 30, and she wants to make up for it. And she wants to take care of her brother, and she wants to take care of her mom because she knows her mom's falling apart. Mm-hmm. But they don't get along, the mother and daughter, because of that. Because I think the mom put a lot of pressure on her for most of her life, and I think Lynette's only defense against it was anger. Like some people, their only defense in the home is just blind anger at times. So people will leave them alone. And so it's a rough dynamic, and I think again, it's Lynette still believes you got to fight and you got to try, and I think the mom's tired of it and tired of her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things too, we're talking a lot about the relationships and sort of the the inheritance, the idea of creating independence, desperation. Both your novels, though, they're incredibly propulsive. There's a page-turning quality to it. There are secrets that sort of come out and expose themselves, and they both sort of have a thriller quality to them in many ways. There are surprises that happen, unexpected things. Willy, some of the scenes that Lynette's involved in, and just yours takes place within, it feels like 24 hours, if I'm remembering it correctly, one night. And the tension mounts all the time throughout the book. Claire, there's also the feeling like characters that are coming inside Julius and Jeannie's world present some terrifying aspects. There's the idea that characters are now threatening them. And I think when you both have set this up with this, these families struggling, but at the same time, the terrors of the real world present themselves in your novels, that makes it very page-turning, very propulsive. And I don't want to say literary or thriller-like, but there is something where you're just like, what is going to happen to Julius and Jeannie? What's going to happen to Lynette? How are they going to survive? And it is both novels are survival stories in a lot of ways. Claire, can you talk a little bit about sort of how you frame that out?
Well, first, I think kind of if you put anyone on the edge in that situation, well, plus writing a novel, you're not going to just solve all their issues kind of on page 3, are you? Otherwise, you're not going to end up with a novel. But, you put somebody in a very difficult situation, and people on the edges of society with very little money and very little resources, things generally get worse at first, because they don't have that agency. They don't have enough funds to suddenly go and sort themselves out and get a new job or whatever it is. So there is that kind of feeling of things spiraling into getting worse. But I think some of that, it's not like I plan that really. I think it's because I'm discovering what's happening as I go along. So maybe that creates some of the kind of dynamic feel or the thriller kind of feel. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a thriller, but I am trying to create a propulsive novel. You're absolutely right. But maybe that comes because as I'm writing, I'm going, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen, or oh, you think that, do you? So it's a surprise to me, and so I hope that some of that comes through to the reader, and maybe it does.
Willie?
Hold on, I'm gonna turn down again. For me, kind of like what Claire said, sometimes desperation, the worst thing about being desperate is it's the time when you probably shouldn't make rash decisions, but it's the time you generally do. So people that panic usually start grasping it for things. I think what I was trying to do was a little bit of that, about Lynette realizing that her mother bought this brand new car right when they're supposed to sign on a loan, and now they're not going to have enough money for the house. So one of the ideas I wanted was Lynette going across a city that's rapidly changing in one night and seeing how greed works. And in a way, one of the ideas for the book was trickle down greed, because President Trump had said, at one time, greed is good. And you can't be too greedy. The point is you can't be too greedy. And I started thinking about greed in terms of not CEOs and great businessmen, but like if you lose community and it's just greed, how's that going to look? And that made me think of writers like James N. Cain, Jim Thompson, Charles Willeford, these old school, hard-boiled, psychologically damaged novels that were really fast and hard, but talked about social issues. So I wanted it short and really fast, and dramatic in that sense of like when you're drowning and you're desperately trying to grab onto something so you don't go down.
Mm-hmm. I noticed reading both your novels that the characters, the love between the siblings, if it's Lynette and Kenny and Julius and Jeannie, as a reader, you fall in love with them too, despite their shortcomings, despite some of the decisions that they make. But I really felt like both you, Claire, and you, Willie, love these characters immensely, and you're sort of guiding them and you're allowing them to make the mistakes. But it was very clear to me that you want the best for these 4 children, and you want them to be able to find their way. And it's not necessarily clear at the end of the book how they're going to be, if they're going to be okay. That's part of it. Is I want to personally go back and ask you, Claire, are they okay? And Willie, did Lynette come back? And is Kenny with her now? But can you talk about how you separate yourself from characters like this? It's easy to hate despicable characters, but these are just 4 wonderful children that the reader just, myself was felt very close to, and very sympathetic to their plight. But can you talk about your relationship with Julius and Jeannie, Claire? And
yeah, well, the weird thing is, obviously, that I create them all. So even the really despicable, awful characters came out of my head too. And if they came out of my head, then I kind of have to be a little bit of all of them, even the really awful ones. And also, obviously, I love the awful ones too, because I don't think you can have a book just with lovely characters, even if they do things wrong. I think you've got to have somebody making things worse. But yeah, I do love them. I think I love Julius the most, because he tries so hard and he gets it so wrong, and it becomes so tragic. Yeah, well, I'm not quite sure what to say, because I do like all of them. And I don't know where they come from. They just get created. They grow.
Willie?
I mean, for me, Lynette kind of runs the novel, and if I'm going to spend two years or 3 years, basically kind of digging a ditch, which is the way I think of writing novels, kind of like digging a ditch, but you're not sure where you're going. I have to believe in them. Lynette's tough because she is really angry, and she's the most, like, the angriest person I've ever written about. But yeah, I really like her because she doesn't quit. And sometimes you write characters to help you out, and at least I do. And she helped me out to just, like, no matter how damaged you are, no matter how dented you become in your life, you still got to get up and try. And the argument in the book is kind of like, should you try and be a part of a community? Should you try or should you just try to, like, get by the best you can and not care about anybody but yourself? And so I was kind of having that debate, just driving through Portland. You can have that debate, and people have that debate all the time about community versus, just looking out for yourself. So yeah, I always loved Lynette. I think she's cool, but man, she's tough.
Yeah.
Pretty tough.
I'm gonna jump off of digging a ditch for 2 years in the writing process. And Claire, I'm gonna go back to sort of a conversation that I sat in with you and your editor, Maisie Cochran, that we did last week with the booksellers, where you talked about the writing process, and how you prefer the editing of yourself versus the writing of it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
the whole digging the ditch.
Yeah, it's digging a ditch with a teaspoon. That's what it's like for me. I really don't like writing. I like having written, I think. So when there are some words on the page, then what I really like is being able to play around with them. And obviously when you have a whole book, a first draft, then you can play around hugely. It's not just individual words. You can, move chapters and move paragraphs and delete stuff, and everything gets shifted about. And that's the thing I like. Before I was a writer, I was a sculptor, and I think maybe it's some of that coming into it, that I like, once something exists, then I like being able to play with it. So I was a stone carver, and So you start with a piece of stone. So what I really like is starting with the first draft. So if somebody could just please give me a first draft, then I can just edit it, and that would be very lovely. And once I've done all those edits, then and I think it's in some kind of shape, and then my editor, so Maisie, as you said, then she kind of digs in even further, and I love that process. And she will come up with amazing ideas and thoughts that I hadn't even noticed in the novels I've written, and just to have someone else's eyes on the text, someone else that you really trust, is a great thing. And I know that some writers, they don't like editing and they don't like being edited. There's something to do with the criticism. I'm not sure what it is, but I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, Claire, I think you and I are related. I'm the exact same way. I love editing because the thing I love about writing the most is it's not a performance. It's just grunt work, and no one has to know if it takes you 50 times to get it right, or maybe it's not right, but at least right in your mind. I love that. The amount of work editing takes, I don't mind at all, but the emotional taxing of writing a first draft, I get tired of. I like it. It's fun because I like being in a new world, but it just kind of wears you out because for whatever reason, my mind, I have a dark mind. And so I'm always writing about things that upset me, or I can't figure out, or scare the hell out of me. And so that wears me out. But once I get it, once I get the stone, like you say, and you can start whacking away at fixing your sinking ship. That's the other thing. I always think of a draft as like a ship that I bought that's sinking. And then now my goal is to get it to, not just duct tape it, but actually get it to where it won't sink. And Jesus, that takes a long time.
Yeah. I love all these metaphors. A ditch and a sinking ship, absolutely.
Well, just the idea, Willie, that the two of you might be related. This is we're going to cross platforms here and talk a little bit about music. One, Claire, some of the most beautiful scenes in the book are when Claire, or Julius and Jeannie, and sometimes Julius, Jeannie, reflecting on the music that they make together and that they perform together in the cottage and with their mother, and that they've come from, and they're just beautiful, beautiful passages. And I've said that to you before, just how the two siblings click when music and their life in music shines through. We learned, I guess, a couple weeks ago that, Willie, when you were touring over in England, Claire has seen you on several occasions, even in the village that Claire lives in. There's a shared love for music, and Claire, you're a big Willy Vlautin music fan. Can you guys talk a little bit about music? Because I think we always want to know, do you listen to music when you're writing? Do you have, or can you not listen to music when you're writing? But talk about a little bit about the music, and Claire, maybe you can share sort of the experience of seeing Willie when you guys didn't even know each other.
Yeah,
last week for the very first time.
It's such a weird coincidence. So I first saw the Delines back in 2015 at a festival called the End of the Road Festival, which I used to go to every single year. And the Delines played on the garden stage outside. It's a lovely summer day. We've talked about this, haven't we, Willie? And I just remember lying back on the grass and letting this music wash over me, and it was absolutely wonderful. And then I learned that the Delines were playing at basically my local pub. It is literally 10 minutes walk down the road. So me and my husband Tim saw Willy and the Delines play there, and then we had booked to see you play last, I think it must have been July, but obviously that got cancelled. So we were really disappointed because that was going to be in our local village hall, which would have been brilliant. So that's how, you know, that's the weird coincidence of me knowing your music really before I met you and really knew your books. But music is really, really important to me when I write. So I work out a playlist. And so one of them was Iron and Wine. So the first book, I listened to Iron and Wine a lot. So I'm not sure how many songs, 40 songs or something. But each book my playlist has got shorter and shorter. So, and I would listen to these songs on a loop for 2 or 3 years, however long it took to write the book. And with Unsettled Ground, it's come down to 2 songs. I listened to literally 2 tracks for 2 years.
Wow.
And drove everybody in my house completely mad. But
what were the songs?
Safety Dance. No.
A song called Polly Vaughan. And it was the version by Tia Blake. It's an old English folk song, very, very beautiful. And a song that my son wrote called "We Roamed Through the Avenue," roamed through the garden. They just seem to suit the tone of the book. They seem to be right. And then the characters are folk musicians. I needed to give them some joy, basically, in this very bleak novel. And I think the music is joyful. So it's seeped in to the characters' lives, really.
Your son's a really good guitar player.
Thank you. I'll tell him you said so.
For me, I can't listen to music at all when I'm writing. I daydream with music too much. Like I can barely hold a conversation with music going on. It's always been an escape tool. The only time years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I wrote a novel to a loop of like kind of ambient whale noise kind of music, like real weird stuff. And I wrote it at the local horse track here in Portland. And for 6 months, I just listened to that loop. And I had the best time I ever had writing. It was a first draft. And when I finished it, I was like, man, this novel is going to be great. I figured out an easy way to write a novel. And then I looked at it and it was like nothing happened. It was me buying a ranch in this area I always wanted to. And it's about me doing that. And a couple crazy guys in it. Like I was just having fun and it was horrible. So I banned all music from writing for me. I wish I could, but I'm just not smart enough. I think I have 2 brain cells left. And if you throw music into it, it hijacks one of them.
The time that you and I went out recently in St. John's, Willy, it involved going to a record store first before the drinks. And just, I think music does something. It's a great cross-pollination with literature in so many ways. And it was just all of a sudden we were just clicking with sort of love for, a lot of like the Waterboys and bands like that we were talking about in the Pogues when I went into your office for the first time. It was my English professor that introduced me to If I Should Fall from Grace with God. So it was like I felt like I had a kindred spirit because of the whole music and literature. But that's very interesting how, Claire, you're able to do that with music. Claire, can you make sure too, a couple people are asking in the chat, your son, also there's a place where I've listened to his music online.
I can put that, I know his website, I can put that in.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
You can listen to his songs right on the website.
Yeah. Yeah, and then if you can search on YouTube for Tia Blake, Polly, can't spell, Vaughan.
I'm gonna,
Yeah.
it's all right, guys. There's a couple questions in the chat. For Willy, how does the process differ between writing song lyrics, prose, daily practice? How does grappling with socioeconomic issues work easier or harder in one or the other?
I mean, it's always hard to write a good political song. I don't think I can do it. I've tried a lot. Some people can do it, and they don't age well often. Maybe it's because I grew up reading John Steinbeck, and he became kind of like a hero to me at that same age. I'm listening to the Jam and the Clash. Is a 13, 14-year-old. I'm also reading a lot of Steinbeck. So it's easier for me to write novels about social things that I think are important or that hurt me or haunt me. But in general, writing songs is like, I always think of writing songs as like you're walking down the street and you see something really cool and you grab onto it as hard as you can and hope it doesn't go away. It's a gift, and you have no idea why I walk down the street. Like, where does melody come from? I mean, I don't know. Writing songs, I think, are just gifts sometimes. Even bad songs, you're like, at least I'm writing something. Where writing is all discipline. It's all grunt work. You might have the idea, but you got to get the idea all the way done. And so it's the same thing for me. If you look at me and I look like hell and I look rough, then you're like, I bet he's writing songs. And then if you see me jogging like a weirdo down Lombard and St. John's here, you'll go, I bet he's writing a novel because he's got the yoga tapes out and he's good.
That's funny. Claire, do you? I know that you're a musician as well, and you play with your son Henry, right?
Oh no.
Oh, but you don't sing or anything.
No.
You just let him do it.
A very long time ago, I was in a band and I sang really very badly. So no. No,
definitely. Yeah. When we heard Henry last week performed for Claire's preview event with the booksellers, and it was just beautiful. And when I wrote to Claire, I said, I feel like he basically has, it feels like almost Nick Drake's soul in your son. And you said he did his thesis on Nick Drake. Yeah.
So I think Nick Drake has seeped into his pores, I'm sure.
Really wonderful way.
And he seems like he's got some John Fahey in him.
He might know who that is, but I'm afraid I'm not sure about who that is.
Guitar super whiz.
Okay.
Throw that in the chat so we can look him up, Willy. So as we're we can certainly take questions from the audience, but I do want to ask this. This is just being writers, Willy being a writer and musician, lives, especially of writers and musicians, where you're out in bookstores, you're out doing events, and now we've all, because of COVID, are leading very insular lives and doing more virtual events. Can I ask what you guys are doing, what you guys have been doing at Homefront as a result of COVID? Anything that you're finding yourself doing? Like for me, it's the vinyl record thing has gotten really bad, and I've gone down like wormholes with the Style Council, the Jam, and so my wife has gotten really tired of this. But is there anything you guys feel like you've been doing during COVID when you can't get out and about, if it's teaching creative writing in person or performing or reading?
Mine is, I'll tell you what I've been doing, but it's nothing, none of those things. My son left home, so Henry left home last October, and he took lots of his stuff with him, but he left a whole drawer, a massive, great big drawer of socks full of holes. So I have been darning Henry's socks. That is what I have been spending my lockdown doing. It's actually really therapeutic. And Tim, my husband, for my birthday, gave me You know those wooden mushrooms that you put inside a sock in order to darn it?
Okay.
Those for my birthday. It's very relaxing.
That's hilarious.
For me, this is the longest I've been home in 20 years. So I just been working. I've been writing weird line songs, and I finished a draft of a novel about a house painter in St. John's. I've been writing a lot of like local kind of stories because I've been here. And I have a dog that I've had that we got right when COVID started, really. And so I just been hanging out with my dog and getting to work on stuff without stopping all the time. Because usually I'll work on a novel for a little bit, and then I got to stop, and then I go tour, and then I come home and try to figure out what I was trying to do, and then and so this has been I hate to say it, but it's been kind of heaven. It's been kind of heaven just to get to stay home.
Yeah, although I find it's nice to stay home, but what I miss is the interaction with readers. So an event like this, we would normally have 46 people in front of us, and so we would see their reactions to the reading, to the things we say, and perhaps questions would be more forthcoming, and I miss that. I really miss that.
Yeah.
Or I'm not sure if you see in the chat, but Two Rivers bookstore does sell darning eggs at the shop.
Please go and buy some darning eggs from Two Rivers and a book.
And a book. Well, this has been wonderful. Do you guys have questions to ask each other?
Well, I can't, before we start tours a lot, we stay with this friend Oliver and Birgit in Winchester, and we've stayed with them for, I was thinking maybe 17 years now, and a lot of times we'll warm up a tour before there, staying with them, and so now I'm going to probably run into you at the grocery store in Winchester. We'll probably get to hang out, and the one thing, I had the best day maybe I've ever had in Winchester is I was touring, this is maybe 6-7 years ago. And I was touring, I was really tired and kind of bummed out. And like you do when you're drunk for 2 weeks and then you really want to go home. And I had 2 hours to myself. And I stumbled onto an art house movie theater in Winchester.
Oh yeah.
And I walked by, and Casablanca was starting in 3 minutes. And I got to go see Casablanca, and there was something about just seeing that big romantic movie and Ingrid Bergman that I was happy for the rest of the, I think we had 2 more weeks of the tour, and I was just happy as hell. So I've always loved Winchester, and now maybe we'll get to hang out in Winchester.
I hope so. Yeah, that would be my question to you. Let's go for a drink.
Yeah.
Well,
hey, we go for a drink and have your son play guitar.
Absolutely. That would be great.
I cannot thank you guys enough for doing this. This was so amazing. There was a question about, will I have signed copies? I can pretty much coerce Willie to walk in the shop. I often run down the street and yell his name. And then maybe, Craig, you can arrange with Claire to send me a handful of signed copies.
Yeah, we're working on book plates as well, right, Claire?
Yeah, I've designed some book plates, and they're meant to be arriving at my house on Monday, and then I'm signing them all, sending them back, and then they'll be sent to bookshops, I think. So, yeah.
So yes, I will have signed copies. I did put the link for the books to pre-order them in the chat. Craig, you were an awesome moderator. Thank you so much for not making me embarrass myself.
Authors like Willie and Claire make it very, very easy.
And Claire, I hope if you get to St. John's, we all get to go to Slim's, because I hope you would love it.
That sounds great. I'd love to.
Yeah.
Really good pot stickers.
Really good pot stickers. Yeah. Do we have any other questions from the audience? I don't see any other ones. Okay, well, thanks everybody. And I hope we can do this again.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Lots of
much.
thank yous.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you, Claire.
Bye.